so many times.
Okay, we're on. We're ready to go? We're ready to roll. So. Okay, thank you. Good morning, council, members of SLT, and the viewing public. I see we do indeed have quorum, so I call this meeting into session. And first up is the singing of the national anthem. And all those that can are able to stand, we ask them to do so.
Sorry, if you could just give me one moment.
And I apologize for not having my mic on at the beginning. The next up is the land recognition statement. And this week, Councillor Kerr will be doing the honors. Councillor?
We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Before we move on to number 4, the approval of agenda, if council will allow me, I'd just like to thank Deputy Mayor Wink for stepping in and performing mayoral duties in my absence. The consensus mayor, councillors, that you did a great job, and I want to personally and publicly thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. To the clerk, approval of the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Kerr. Be it resolved that the agenda for October 4th, 2023, the regular meeting of council be adopted as circulated. For the vote.
Any discussion? And now for the vote. Carries.
Thank you. Now to disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof.
Thank you. After viewing the agenda, is there any councillor that has a pecuniary interest to declare? Not seeing any, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. So moving to item 6 on the agenda, the adoption of the previous minutes. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wink and seconded by Councillor Eckhart. Be resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. C-17/2023, regular council meeting, September 20th, 2023.
Thank you. Any errors or omissions that any counselor spotted in these minutes? Not seeing any. We'll call the vote. All those in favor? Carries. Thank you.
So now moving to item 7, if any council members have an item from the consent agenda they want to lift for separate resolution, now would be the time to make note of it.
Thank you. Any counselor have any items in the consent agenda that they would like to lift? Not seeing any, Mr. Clerk.
So we'll move to item 8. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Niznik and seconded by Councillor Olson. Be resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the October 4th, 2023 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved. Perhaps if we just break them down by 8.1, 8.2, 8.3.
Yes,
we'll
that
go through
sounds
that way.
fine.
So starting with 8.1, if there's anything in those reports.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, when we took on this project, the climate for investment and financing wasn't exactly receptive. And I'm so happy that we did this. And now we're moving on to the next phase of it. And I wanted to ask the Director of Public Works about a couple of places where we have lighting needs, and seeking to extend this into perhaps the ballpark at Fonthill Lions and the platform tennis. These are small organizations that do so much for our community and ask for so little back. Is there any possible way that we can fit these types of things? And that's not an exclusive or complete list. There's the Legion parking lot is a little difficult for the elderly, and some of the church parking lots at night have become a little bit dangerous for people. If there's any way we could fit this under the contract that we have with the various, or with our supplier there.
So I will turn to the Director of Public Works, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the current contract we have in place with Real Term Energy is to replace all the municipal street lighting. So that's the extent of the contract as we have it now. I know with the Platform Tennis Club, I believe those were municipal lights that were lighting the parking lot for the old arena site. So I believe there is probably still a light there that would be replaced or could be replaced on this contract. But as for private properties, the current contract does not cover that.
Thank you.
Thank
Councillor?
you. Thank you. Further, through you, Mr. Mayor, further. So are the lights that are on the platform tennis courts themselves, are they owned by the municipality? And I guess I could wait for an answer on that, because if they are, then it would seem to me that they might be replaced by under the contract. That's possible.
To the Director?
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The actual lights on the facility itself would be ownership of the Platform Tennis Club. Now, if that's a municipal facility, then that's something we could consider. I don't have the answer at this time whether or not we would replace those underneath the contract, but the specific light I'm talking about is a light standards that were in the existing parking lot that were left on to accommodate the parking arrangements for that facility.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand that now, but it raises the question whether those are leasehold improvements, and I imagine they are, and it would probably be subject to some research, and I don't expect an answer this morning, but if it's a possibility, it would be, I think the cost that they estimate is a $9,000 cost for doing that. That was what was in their submission to Trillium. So if it could be done, it would be a big deal, a big thing for the club there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to the CAO. Any comments he may have on your queries?
Good morning. We're happy to take direction from council. Obviously, the original concept was simply public property, those things for which we're already responsible and looking to enjoy some savings. If it's the will of council, I would imagine our best mechanism is to report back to you with what it might cost us to extend the current project to slightly broaden the parameters and see if we can get some per unit costing. I would imagine we could do that before the end of the year. Or that's the sort of thing, if we had that data, we could refer it to budget and you can look at that like any other community grant request through the usual process that you're going to be engaging in 6 to 8 weeks. So that would be the possibility. I would simply caution that if there are any specific places you want us to look at, we should really be informed, because otherwise it's sort of a never-ending cycle. But beyond that, we could certainly try to gather some data for this line of inquiry, and like any other request, you can decide its merits or lack thereof at budget time.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that. So can we take that, Councillor, as direction, or should that be a council decision?
We've only heard from one person so far. If you want to give us we're happy to take direction, or you can do through motion as you prefer. You don't have to go as far as a motion if there's group support, and if it's a divided issue, then I think you should probably have a vote and direct us.
Okay, thank you. Well, back to you, Councillor.
Yes, then in that case, Mr. Mayor, I would like to give notice that I want to make a notice of motion with respect to the lights and the sewage and water for the tennis, platform tennis club, when the time comes up to present notice of motion.
I will turn back to the CAO.
Sorry, due to the magic of technology, I suddenly have it in my mind that we have in fact applied for a grant to cover the lights at the courts. We just haven't heard from the grant funder yet. So in fairness, that one we have taken work and submitted that. So we don't know the status of that, but if we get the grant, they will be efficient lights.
Okay. So I'll turn to council on the discussion that Councillor Olson brought forward. If we were, although I guess if he's going to bring a notice of motion, but if we were to just do a direction to staff on this, but Councillor Olson brought up, is there any other further discussion on that? Councillor Kerr?
My comment will be, it kind of follows, we're dealing with private lands versus public lands, which the director brought up. Before you can really consider adding some things and hearing the one of, you start yourself down a path, and then there's a whole bunch that there probably needs to be an inventory done of potential private lands and have groups approach the council to indicate, because we may find that one group gets it and then 6 months later another group appears, and 6 months later another group appears. I just think it needs to be organized. The platform tennis people have been covered relative to a grant, and I think that's application, which I think is great. But personally, I think that's where we should sit at this point. But it's just to help staff in terms of trying to decide how many potential locations there might be and potential costs.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Hildebrand.
On this subject, through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the platform tennis is on town land, and it is a town-owned building.
Okay.
So therefore, I think it applies.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the bottom line, Council, if you do want to bring a notice of motion, and then we could vote on that. Again, I see the CAO is wincing. Go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Well, not that it's winsome, but in an effort to be helpful, the matter's properly on an agenda now. You're properly discussing the matter now. If you want to give us direction or bring a motion on this topic, it's entirely appropriate now. The notice of motion process is really for you to, from cold, introduce a subject matter. And essentially, it also gives you the right to force something on an agenda, should that be your will. You don't have to force. This is already here. It's already properly before you. So we could take a motion today. I'm not specifically encouraging, but you have every right to give us direction and or pass a motion on this topic at the moment. So
Okay.
if that's the will.
Thank you for that clarification. So, Councillor Olson, if you did want to bring forth a motion today about the private, I realize the private line you're talking about is service clubs and what have you, but if you did want to bring that motion forward, we would discuss it fuller and then vote on it. It's up to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I would leave the lights out, and I would make a motion that requesting a study of the hooking up the water lines and the sewage lines at an alternate site We budgeted $25,000 now in the last budgeting process, I think, and the price may change given the distance. But that would be my motion.
And
for
that, so that
calling for a
motion is,
study.
and that is for the platform tennis.
For the platform tennis,
Yes.
requesting a study. Probably, I don't want to see it go on very long because of the winter coming up, and they're using a portable, and they've been using it for now 3 years.
Yes.
So,
And the background on that, of course, is the fact that we thought that one subdivision was going to move together, going to move faster, and we were just going to hook in there.
Yeah.
And now because that seems to be stalled, this would be to hook them up to the street over.
yeah.
First of all, before I go any further, so, Director of Public Works, is that what we're basically discussing here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. So I don't think it's really a study per se. Staff can bring back a report to council and report back on what the cost would be to install those services to that facility.
Okay, thank you. And go to Councilor Wink.
Yes, so thank you, Mayor, through you. Just a point of order here. We're talking about streetlights as far as the topic is concerned, and all of a sudden it's gone into sewage, which has absolutely nothing to do with the streetlights. So to put a motion through at this time or a request regarding sewage is, to my view, inappropriate.
Okay. And probably in hindsight, I believe you to be correct. Mr. Clerk, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I would concur with the point of order, and I've made the note, and we'll just bring it forward under item 14, notices of motion, that Councillor Olson has provided that notice of motion, so that's been dealt with. We won't have to deal with it again when we get to item 14 on the agenda.
Councilor Olson?
I will follow directions as far as I have, so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other discussion on the LED streetlight replacement update? Councilor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, to the Director of Public Works. We've been notified that TransTest, our supplier or the maintenance provider for our lights in the past number of years, is no longer going to be providing that services in '24. Your proposal indicates that you're going to have Real-Term responsible for this new installation that you're adding to the lights with regards to monitoring traffic. And also, the second question I have is, since Real-Term is a responsible vendor for our street lights under a 10-year warranty, who is responsible for those maintenance lights going on these LED street light replacements?
Turn to the director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So, yes, Real-Term has been retained by the town to do the streetlight conversion project. And as part of that contract, materials and workmanship will be warrantied. The materials themselves are warranted for 10 years. The labor, I don't have that answer readily available now, but Real-Term will be responsible for maintenance with respect to the installation themselves. Following that period, TransTest is currently our service provider for maintaining our streetlights. Part of the reason that they're not going to continue on is that once we do the conversion, there will be a lot less work to do with the maintenance of our streetlight system. We've reached out to other municipalities as well. They're dealing with kind of the similar situation. Currently, we're drafting an RFP to go out for a maintenance contract. Like to make it a 3-year contract where we would retain a service provider to carry out those maintenance services for us for our streetlight system. And currently, we're discussing these issues with other municipalities as well to see if we can partner up with them, see what kind of savings would be involved with us focusing on one contractor through one RFP. So still the initial stages of that, but we're looking at getting a maintenance agreement through an RFP process sometime in January.
Councillor?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments on 8.11? Councillor Kerr.
Just one last quick question. So the street lights are all the overhead lights that are hanging on the posts, not does that include streetlights that are a single post where there's a light coming, let's
To
say,
the director?
10 to 12 feet above ground?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So it's all the streetlights that would be, even the decorative streetlights, yes. So there's basically several different types of streetlights throughout the town. The most common one you see is called the Cobra Head. Those are the ones that hang over top of the road, off of hydro poles or specific designated streetlight poles. But there are decorative lights throughout the town that are also being converted to LED as well.
One last question,
Yep,
through you, Mr. Mayor.
Counselor.
Would this include the updating of the decorative lights within the confines of the downtown Fenwick? There are some there that are LED, but there are also gas lights there as well. So I'm just wondering whether they're under the purvey of all of this.
To the director?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So currently the contract does not include the replacement of the 5 gas lights that are in downtown Fenwick.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. We'll go down to 8.12, telecommunication tower, 1022 Pelham Street. Any comments or questions on this? I see Councilor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The question I have on the communication tower is not necessarily related to location, but has to do with the effectiveness of putting a tower there. I'm aware of a tower that we put on a piece of land in another municipality. It was a 90-foot tower, but the signal in the area had to be transmitted to a tower 5 kilometers away and then sent back to the residents. So in terms of the residents' improvement in cell phone service in that area, it didn't help them one bit. So I'm concerned we're going to be putting a tower in and we're not getting improvement in that area. So I just want to make sure we get an answer from staff that there really is going to be an improvement in the area when we put the cell phone tower in. That's the question I have.
I will turn to the CAO.
Sorry, I don't have much expertise in this topic. Maybe I'd defer to Director Weens.
Oh.
Fundamentally, we have no input into this decision. It's federal jurisdiction, I can tell you that. And most of our laws and rules don't apply to it, which is, I'm paraphrasing the report. It's got a lot more detail than that, but basically, this is really an FYI report, which is why it's in this section. We have no power or jurisdiction in any meaningful way over this issue. But my remarks for technical specifications. Barb Weens is awesome.
We will turn to the Director of Planning. Ms. Weens, any further comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. The proponent for the cell tower did do a presentation here at the end of August and did answer a number of questions from the community about, improving cell service in this area, because there were a number of residents that did come out expressing concern that cell service was very poor in this area, lots of drop calls and so forth. So they did provide reassurance that there would be improvement to the cell service. That being said, I cannot give you the technical answer of what is going on this tower. Is it a receiver? Is it a transmitter? Those kind of questions, I'd have to go back to the proponent and get that information in that specific detail. Certainly, the report is with regards to the location of the tower as opposed to the technology that's on the tower. But I'll endeavor to get that information and inform council.
Great. Thank you for those comments. I'll turn back to the Councillor.
Thank you. That's adequate.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, questions on the tower? I see none. 8.13, update ward boundary review and deputy mayor selection process. Any comments or questions on this report? Oh, Councilor Hildebrand?
For you, Mr. Mayor, when I approved this report, one of the areas that I was concerned about is the suggestion that we would be evaluating whether we would have councillors at large. I just want to reiterate my position on councillors at large. I'm not in favor of councillors at large. I involved with the city of Niagara Falls, and they have councilors at Nodge, and I see how people are elected, and I don't think it's appropriate for Pelham. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Any other comments, Councilor Olson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO, reading through the project schedule here, at the end of Phase 2, and this is page 12 for reference. At the end of Phase 2, there's a preliminary report, and at that point, we've expended something like $20,000 on the report. The Phase 3 and 4 cost another approximately another $20,000. So at the halfway point, we'll have a preliminary report, which will probably be confirmed by the other reports, I would imagine. Will we receive the preliminary report or a final report?
To the CAO?
Well, the preliminary report's the halfway mark, if you will. It's what sets out some options and parameters so that council and the public both have something to sink their teeth into before it carries on further down the way. So at the moment, it's in the hands of the experts who are sort of going through our data as far as where people live, how many people live there, et cetera, and then the history of the community, what makes sense before they can present you with options. So that will come to you at the halfway. And yes, that will be the document that's shown to you in draft to give some sort of basis for the public process, the consultation process, and to inform your debates as you start seeing what's possible and then think about what's ideal for this community. So it's necessary, that document has to be shown to you and to the public so that everyone can have something to sink their teeth into and talk about. So that's the intentionality of and the logic of the process.
Councillor?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm satisfied with that process because it seems to me that, well, I won't make a comment on the process and the integrity of the process, but that's the process, so.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Olson. Any other comments on the report? Not seeing any. Going down to action correspondence of a routine nature, 8.21, the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 613 Poppy Campaign request for 2023. After reading their report, any questions or comments? Not seeing any. The 8.3 information correspondence, I'll go right down. Then 8.4 advisory committee minutes for information. 8.41 Lincoln Pelham Union Public Library Board June 20th meeting minutes. Any comments or questions on any of those items? Not seeing any. And that's it. To the clerk.
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have the motion on the floor, so if there's no more comments or questions from members of council, we can proceed with the vote.
Okay, one last time. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any, Mr. Clerk. We'll call the vote. All those in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you. So now moving to item 10, staff reports. I have a 10.1.1. I have a motion moved by Councillor Eckhart, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that Council received the report 2023-0220 Public Works Sulphur Springs Slope Stability Design Build Tender Results for information, and that Council approved the cancellation of the Sulphur Springs Slope Stability Design Project, and that Council authorized the staff to prepare a request for proposals for engineering services to prepare geotechnical engineering investigations and provide slope stability designs for the 4 failing embankments identified within the report. To you for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Before I pass this over to council, I'd just like to, 1 or 2 comments. Number one, I realize that this is a single, we only had one application come in for the tender, and normally I would be very much against going with single source. In this particular case, the contractor is very familiar with the area, has done work for the town in that same area, and we know him to be we've had satisfactory work done with this contractor. So I would not be in favor of postponing this. I would like to see us proceed with the letting out of this contract to the sole bidder, as it were, and open up the council to see if other members agree on this one. Councilor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I recall when we had the discussions on the savings of design and build and how this could work for us. And to my knowledge, the Sulphur Springs, that first project was the first one, and it was done very well. And it was actually awarded the best project of the year in 2021. That was our experience. And I was down there yesterday, and you can almost you can go through there, and it almost appears like there's not been any work done there on the stream bed. And it's also clear to me that the number of obstacles that came up, administrative and bureaucratic obstacles came up while we were doing that, that the contractor in that case handled them very well, and I think they could do the same kind of thing, because that has implications from fisheries and oceans and all kinds of things that they have to comply with in conservation authority. So I would be in favor of awarding the contract to Duffin because of because of the experience, and because they're the only ones that came forward. And I think this is the way to go, is design and build. And I think it's the way to go in all the other projects that we have, including the other slope failures, especially the one on River Road, which will eventually come to this table here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree with my fellow councillor. We know that there's two different methods to provide services for a contract. There's the design build, and then there's the other method where you go for consulting services, come up with a consulting engineer, and then you have a award of a contract later through an RFP. I agree for larger contracts, that's a way to go for the big things like Pelham Road and major expenditures where you're talking millions of dollars. Here we're talking hundreds of thousands. I mean, that's not a significant amount. And I think that this contractor has been down in Sulphur Springs area. I just want to remind councilors as well that just because it's a design build doesn't mean that he doesn't use an architect or all the other professionals. He needs to get all those engineering professionals online. Just he is responsible for doing it, and then he's also responsible for getting all the permits. So it's just and I lived in the engineering world for 20 years. And design build on this level and with the familiarity that this contractor has in this area, I don't think there's any other option we really have. So I'm totally supportive of proceeding on this issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kerr?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I look at there's really, because there's four entities that are sort of bulked together in this, because there's the elimination of one, but then it's brought back in with three additional ones. My personal instinct is that the Sulphur Springs one should proceed as was tendered out previously. The contractor has a track record we've all talked about when tendering processes come in. The quality of the contractor always has to come to the forefront so that we don't get stuck with a absolute lowest bid tender, which there were discussions previously for other projects. This one in particular, I think, can go ahead through the success previously, the knowledge of the area, my background in agriculture, and that people who know the area intimately have a far greater understanding of what they're walking into, as well as going ahead with, versus someone who comes in cold and says, well, I can't trust what the previous person has done. I have to start from square one and spend a bundle of money reaffirming what has already been known by others for a while. So as I said, my instinct is to follow along with the Sulphur Springs one if there's a reason to separate the other ones out, to go through and separate as a design-build application process out to tender. I'm fine with that, but I think to bulk everything back into an RFP and start from square one again, I think is going to just wind up spending far more money than we need to for the town.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wink.
So my question to the director, this is the third phase. Does it incorporate going into 12 Mile Creek again? If you could just answer that first one, please.
To the director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it's not it's not adjacent to the water course, so it won't be, the requirements to protect the 12 Mile Creek will not be as stringent as it was in the previous two projects.
Thank you.
So, just a follow-up question. So, thank you. Just a follow-up question on this. Apparently, it's going to take another 4 months to get this done. So obviously, it's October now. It's going to be dragged on into 2024. Can this work be done during the winter months? And piggybacking on that, it's October now. Why is this coming to us in October for a project that's going to take considerable time? Shouldn't this have been brought forward to us much earlier in the year?
I'll go back to the director, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So to answer the first question, I'm not sure what kind of working restrictions would be placed on the contract. That would be part of the design build responsibility. They're going to have to get the permits through the NPCA, Niagara Escarpment Commission. With respect to in-water working restrictions, obviously we won't have that because we're not adjacent to the water course itself. So in my past experiences, that's kind of been the one area where it's affected what times of year you can work. Obviously, there's other species, vegetation, birds, that type of thing that'll have to be considered as part of the application process, and that'll determine windows of construction. With respect to the timing, it was a design build process. We allowed for, I think, 4 weeks for the proponents to review and the tender documents and provide bids. Because it's an RFP evaluation process, it's not simply a tender, so it was a review that had to be done and a scoring that had to be done on those submissions themselves. We only had one. But it's just the timing. There's no real reason for it to come to you now other than the fact that based on the staff's opinion, there are other areas in town that are going to need to be addressed with respect to different types of slope failures. Normal practice would be to do some extensive engineering to determine what the cause of failure is. The slope failures are different than going down and reconstructing a road. You're looking at slip planes and what the mechanism of failure is before you can even address how you design it and fix it. So that's going to be the first step. So moving forward, if it's council's direction to move forward with the design build process, this year will be engineering and investigations and determining what the methods of failure is, and construction would definitely be pushed till next year.
To the councillor.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I just want to make sure that in the future that we start these processes earlier in the year, so we're not sitting here in October and looking at projects being punted into 2024. So those are my comments. I will be supporting the comments that we move forward with the design build with Duffin. So I'm in agreement with the other councillors.
Okay, thanks. And if I may, just before I go to the other councillors, I know this contractor very well, and he pointed out to myself he's had vast experience in bankment control, and if you ever drive the number 8 highway from Jordan to Vineland, as you go up that hill, you'll see that it was quite an engineering feat to keep that hill from coming down on the number 8, and this contracting firm did that job 35 or 40 years ago. And it is, the mountain hasn't moved any appreciable distance. So this contractor does in fact have a lot of experience with this kind of work. And also the reason I would like to see it go is because the citizens on that road, they've been waiting quite a while to have this drive brought back up to specs as such. And I would just like to, as opposed to going back to square one and what have you, again, the contractor is very dedicated to this type of work, and I'm sure he's capable of doing this. Obviously, he is. Anyway, go back to council. Did I see some hands? Councilor Nesnak.
Yes, thank you. So through you, Mr. Mayor, just a question to our Deputy Treasurer, Mr. Siraj. Where would we find the $137,000 shortfall for this project?
To the Deputy Treasurer.
Thank you. Through the mayor. So I think it's identified in the report that we would be canceling an existing project and using the funding sources from that project. And outside of that, if we are looking for the additional funding, we can explore our reserve funds to see if we have available funding in the reserve fund to pay for the shortfall.
Okay.
Councillor?
Right. So I don't think we're canceling this particular project. So if we went ahead with this project, we would be $137,000. So that would come out of reserve, is that what you're saying? If it went forward? Okay. And I guess I have one more question through you, Mr. Mayor, to our Public Works fella. When did the other Spencer Lane, Center Street, and River Road issues become apparent? And I guess if those were already known when the Sulphur Springs Drive event RPF went out, how come we didn't already include that in the first RPF when we kind of went down that road? Or are these newer structures that are failing?
To the Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So when we proposed this project to council, there was two projects that were identified. One was Sulphur Springs Road, one was Center Street. Those failures are very evident and are picked up through our road patrols. At that time, it was council directed staff to just proceed with Sulphur Springs Road under design build. The project that was originally proposed did not include the construction portion. It only included the engineering work to investigate and determine what the method of failure was. So we took the $250,000 on council's direction to put a design build out for Sulphur Springs Road, put the RFP out, and it came back, $137,000 over budget. So we're here now, I guess, asking for the additional funds to carry out that design build project. There's no funds currently set aside to look at Center Street. That'll have to be a future budget consideration. The other two slope failures, one on Spencer Lane and one on River Road, became apparent to us throughout the year this year. So those are also projects that are going to have to be addressed and will have to be part of a future budget ask.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When this first came to council the last time, there was a proposal put forward to put out the engineering study and put the money forward, and council basically rejected that, and we voted on and directed a design build. Now it looks like we're taking a second swipe at that and rejecting that, and I'm not in favor of that. I'm in favor of the original decision by council to go ahead with this project. So I would be in support of the action to go ahead and repair Sulphur Springs.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And if I'll turn to the Deputy Treasurer on financing. So we have, when we okayed the design build, we, I believe staff had the $270,000 is already allocated to this project, correct? So what I was wondering if we do in fact go ahead with this, that 270 will probably get the geotech studies done. And also if we do move ahead now, then the contractor has X number of months to go ahead and get permits, which, as we discovered on Sulphur Springs, can sometimes be an onerous undertaking. So And so the other 143,000 that we're asking for, we can actually, I would think, that's the question to you, we could be taking that, we won't have to take it now, especially if the actual work isn't getting done till spring or summer as it may be. So the 143 additional will be able to be budgeted perhaps in the next budget. Yes?
Thank you. Through the mayor. Yes, that is correct. So depending on the timing of when the capital outlay is required, we can take a look and we can add the additional funding, like you said, as part of our budget deliberations. So they could be considered along with all the other capital needs, and it would be approved as part of the 2024 budget if council chooses to do so.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Any further questions or discussions? And then I'll turn to the clerk as to the way forward here, sir. I believe the wishes of council is to move forward with the design build tender.
Mr. Mayor, that is correct. So there was a motion on the floor by Councillor Eckhart and Hildebrand. With their concurrence, we can withdraw that motion and council's concurrence. And then we'd put another motion on the floor now, moved by Councillor Eckhart and seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be resolved the council received the report 2023-220 Public Works Sulphur Springs Slope Stability Design Build Tender Results for information, and the council approved the Sulphur Springs Slope Stability Design and Project Build as tendered.
Excellent. Any questions or comments on this motion? Not seeing any. We'll call the vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Council Nesnick.
I just see in that there's a third, authorize staff to prepare a request for proposal for engineering services. Should that be changed?
We've removed that from
For
this
the-
motion.
Okay, are you going to make another motion then to ask them to do that for the 3 failing embankments identified in the report?
I think those will be part of the budget discussion as
Move
we
those
move
to next
forward in
year's budget
2024.
discussions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Again, any other comments, questions on the motion before us? Not seen. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is passed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So now moving to item 10.1.2 on your agenda, I have a motion moved by Councillor Wink and seconded by Councillor Kerr. Be it resolved, the council receive report 2023-200, feasibility study for joint operations center with Niagara Region for information, and the council directs staff to include $50,000 to fund the town of Pelham's cost contribution to the feasibility study as part of the 2024 capital budget for council's consideration.
Talk on that or not? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Before I open it to council, I'll ask the CAO if he has any additional comments.
On behalf of your entire staff, we're really excited about the potential underlying in this report. This is one of the key items council approved in the strategic plan, was figuring out a future of Tice Road. And while this has no answers, it's a major step forward. And more importantly, it's our potential partner putting its money where its mouth is and actually taking the lead. As we're here secondary, not first. So it's a wonderful gesture by the region. No one knows what the end result is, what the ideal, and what's possible. There's some land use challenges with their facilities on Highway 20 as well. I understand there's a water course, et cetera, there. So this requires some study. We have a willing partner and a potential wonderful collaboration opportunity, which is also part of the strategic plan approved by you. So I think this hits on at least 2 levels, and it will allow us to see, is this a viable option, and if so, to what degree, and give us a path forward. So really excited about what this suggests. It's an excellent demonstration of the capacity of Niagara municipalities to work together and to build something that's more than the sum of its parts. So I very much hope this meets with your approval. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. Any other questions? We'll go to Councillor Kerr.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess it's about time. I've been aware of this potential for well over a decade, and prior to that as being suggestions put forward, but unfortunately had run into obstacles due to other situations, maybe let's say conflicts that had occurred that became minor roadblocks and changes in players. So I applaud the fact that this is going forward. I think it's a great move forward. I think it's going to be in the benefit for everybody in this entire town and the region to finally get this thing forward. So I'm in full support.
Excellent. Thank you for those comments, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Olson?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, I'm in favor of this. It makes common sense, and money should follow common sense, I think. And I just want to make sure that when accepting this, we've got this report in front of us that talks about shared services, and I'm concerned about the list that we have is whether this is an exhaustive list, because it contains things like shared services opportunities on Appendix 1, and number 1 at the top corner is fire services. You know, and are these all the things that are going to be addressed as possibilities for amalgamation or of services, or what is this list that we have in front of us? Because I don't see things on there like economic development and trade, and I don't see anything on here like tourism, and I don't see anything on trails and pathways. So these are opportunities, and I mean, these are details. Are we accepting these, or when we pass this report, or not?
I will, oh, wait, Councillor.
Can I ask the CAO that question, please?
Oh,
So, point of order again on this one, we're going on to something that's not on the agenda. All that this report is saying, a feasibility study, joint operations with the Niagara region for this particular property. The other stuff that you're bringing forward, Councillor, has nothing to do with this report.
Mr. Mayor, through you, it references 2023-02 Public Works, and that's the number on the top of this report.
okay. I will
on topic.
ask the clerk to his comments.
I'm going to bounce it over to the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. To the CAO.
Well, look, the focus of this report, it is true, is just on the public works. There are plenty of other efforts we are putting in. I personally put a fair number of hours into over the past year as far as other potential collaborations with other governments throughout Niagara in the hopes of finding better models of service delivery. But, and nothing gets to happen. So to go back to Municipality 101, if we're ever going to change our service delivery model on any topic, that requires council approval. That's not a power you have delegated to my office. So that's not something that the town administration can do without votes by council. So you are in charge. You always have been. You always will be. I'll reiterate that point. With respect to the matter before you, in the immediate sense, we think this is a wonderful opportunity. And what's great is the region's paying all the money up front, and obviously there's going to be an ask for reimbursement later on next year. But it gets the ball rolling this calendar year on that analysis on what's possible. So I hope that, we definitely hope that meets with your approval, and that it turns into a good opportunity. But if it doesn't, it also eliminates an opportunity, and that's still of great value. Because until we answer that question, it's one of probably three routes forward, and this is a great chance to share the cost and figure out what our future, if any, is on Highway 20. The other things will come before council, or may come before council in due course.
Thank you. I don't know if you answered the question, but I can see both sides here. As Councillor Olson says, he is talking about something that was in the report, and I realize the main focus of this report was the Public Works garage, or shared services at the Public Works. Councillor Wink.
So, Councillor Olson was referring to an Appendix
Yes.
A. There is no Appendix A in this particular report. It was some correspondence that was passed.
no.
It was some correspondence passed on from the CAO's office. The rest of the potential shared services, as the CAO alluded to in his last sentence, was that there will be further reports coming to council. So we're not debating all the other shared services potential with other municipalities at this point in time. What we're talking about in this report is a potential shared service with the region for the operating yard.
Yes.
And that's the report.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, in the
Councilor
first
Olson?
place, it was Appendix 1, and there's a whole list of potentials. So it says shared services opportunities, and then there's a whole list of detailed things. But I withdraw that because I think this is important to get through the yards, because I think that's the right idea. But I just don't want the door open for this type of thing, which inevitably will be some kind of a numbers, data-driven thing that will take things away from our community, because I think the decision-making on a number of these things should be left with the community level and not
Yes.
at the region.
Yeah, and I believe the CAO alluded to that. The concerns you have will remain at the municipal level. Perhaps it will start at the region, but it will come down that each municipality will make the decision whether to join a certain venture or stand alone on that venture. I believe that's what you were saying, Mr. CAO. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor?
Yes, well, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make the point too, that when we do things like these triple majorities and that type of thing, and how we always end up being the one vote out of 15 or 20 or whatever it is, and, there's things that we need to preserve in the community rather than build some gigantic bureaucracy that's unresponsive to people. So that's my final point, so.
Okay, and thank you for that, Councilor Olson. Okay, to the clerk, because I don't know where to go, so I turn to you.
Yeah, exactly. So we do have a resolution on the floor. I think it's been adequately debated, but I'll leave that up to you.
I
And
believe
if,
that it has.
If we are, we're ready to call the vote on that.
Okay, so on this feasibility study for Joint Operations Center, any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Now it passes.
Yes, so now moving to item 10.1.3. I have a motion moved by Councillor Olson and seconded by Councillor Nisnik. Be it resolved, the council receive report 2023-0230, strategic use of town-owned lands for information, and that council identify and direct staff with respect to the next steps.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Any questions, comments on this report? Councillor Nisnik.
Yes, so thank you very much. As I read through it, and as I came to kind of understand the layout of the land surrounding it, I understand that the current temporary parking lot behind the MCC along Meridian Way, which was the initial kind of sort of temporary parking lot, that is not town-owned lands. Am I correct on that?
To this, I'll go to Ms. Weens, Town Planner, Director.
Mr. Mayor, through you, off of Meridian Way, there is a site that was used as it housed the construction trailer and parking of equipment when the Meridian Center was under construction. That site is on the corner of Meridian and Rice Road. That is under separate ownership. The town does not own that. That is the site for the it's a 7-story apartment building with medical offices on the ground floor. So the temporary parking that is on the back side of Meridian that you access from Summersides, that is the piece that's under the town's ownership.
Thank you. Okay.
Counselor?
Correct. Yeah. So, so given that, I personally feel that those lands either need to be a portion of them saved for continued or extend the parking for the MCC, or all of it be retained for the parking of the MCC. My question is there any way we can get a little bit creative with the use of that asphalt in terms of creating, if you fenced it or a portion of it was fenced and then opened up as needed for parking, but could you fence it and then use it as an outdoor asphalt area for recreation? So that, just to get a little creative, so it's not just a big concrete paved area, but could be a multi-use surface. But I definitely do feel that extend needs to be saved under town ownership for parking, because even on Saturday when I drove by, the partial parking space was being used. The parking lot was packed when the MCC was first built. I feel that the parking had changed from the initial drawings to what actually was created, and parking was greatly reduced. And it has never been sufficient. And if we give that away, we are in a real up the creek without a paddle, to say the least. But is it possible to get creative with that use so that it can be a multi-use, so it's not always in need, but when it is in need, you can open it up and use it for parking? That's, I guess, just trying to get creative here. Thank you.
Now, is that that's a question you'd like to direct?
Yes. I suppose.
Okay, I'll then go to Ms. Weens. Any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Certainly it's something that could be looked at. But when you deal with, the grading and drainage of a parking lot, it'll be different than grading and drainage for a multi-use kind of recreational asphalt area. Those are typically flat and have different kind of grading challenges. So that would be something that we would have to consider and to look at to determine whether or not it is feasible. And I don't know if the Director of Public Works wants to weigh in on that question or not. And the layout of it and the design of it would have to take into consideration the kind of the travel routes that people use for driving around and navigating through the parking lot. So all of that would have to be taken into consideration before we can confirm that it is feasible.
No.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Olson?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just a comment about the parking. We've always had a problem with the accessibility parking. It doesn't seem to be sufficient, and I kind of wonder whether or not somebody who has to use accessibility parking and then has to cross a street that's pretty busy, and whether we've optimized that. And I would suggest that the front entrance, the original front entrance of the building, should be utilized for parking where we now have the patio. And I'm not suggesting we take the patio up, but there are spots there that could be used for accessible parking as well. And if you look at a parking lot that sits empty for most of the night, most of the day, or half empty most of the day, that's a pure definition of waste. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have it because the building should be allowed to operate. I'm not saying that we should forego the sale of the land, because part of the promise in building the MCC was that the proceeds from the sale of the land would cover the cost. I'm looking for something a little more creative as far as perhaps even a parking structure there on the existing lot, because we need more space. But it's we promised people that we would take the funds from the sale of the lands to cover the cost of the MCC when it was built. And I think that was kind of an important promise to a lot of people who are paying taxes. So,
Okay.
comment.
Yep, thank you for those comments. Any other comments on the report? There's a lot of options in that report. Yes, Council Wink.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Going back into last term of council, I was the one who put the motion through to take this part 4 off the table till we could look at that land. The MCC, when it was built, did not provide sufficient parking. I believe that the council and the CAO envisioned that they could build a parking garage, as Councilor Olson suggested, but a parking garage is going to cost millions of dollars to put in. I would love to be able to bring a hotel into town, and this is the only land that the town has. However, once we added the parking spaces that we did, the temporary parking spaces, part of the downfall or the flaw in that is the parking spaces were never lined, and people didn't park where they should park and whatever. And instead of having 74 parking spaces, we were probably down to 50 in there. My thought now and always has been is to retain that portion for those 74 parking spots and sell off the other piece of land, and that land, that sale of that land would contribute and probably close to cover the cost of permanent drainage and surfacing and the like for the remnant part. So I would like to see that we retain 74 parking spots and sell off the rest for to be used towards the parking lot repairs.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on the report? Councilor Kerr.
This is probably one of the more challenging things when you start to think about it, when you have a myriad of options put in front of you. Recognizing, I think it was highlighted at the very beginning that the design of the parking requirements for the Meridian Center were inadequate for what we saw and what we've seen in the future. We've all read about what the temporary parking and suddenly frost heave and buses getting stuck and everything else, which doesn't make for good press or reputation anywhere. Councilor Niznik brought up, the creativity of utilization of parking spots for alternative uses under lower pressure items. This happens in a lot of places with relative to parking areas where there's temporary tents and other things for special events and other things that can be identified as alternative uses. Not necessarily just recreation, but we might have cultural items or other things that could be done in sporadic basis on particular pieces of property where parking is, but not compromise it in looking. I listened to Councilor Olson talking about open spaces for a facility that aren't used overnight are a waste of facilities. The dilemma is you need the facility at some point during the day. I've traveled to enough municipalities and enough areas where there's lots of open parking spaces around their major facilities. Even at the professional level, there's thousands of parking spaces that are put in surrounding stadiums and other items that sometimes are only used twice a week, 3 times a week. Or you could look at the utility of what was done in the city of Winnipeg, in that they have their football stadium, their hockey arena, and a shopping mall all sharing the same parking lot, which I thought was probably one of the more brilliant opportunities. So Sunday afternoon football had parking. Evening hockey had parking when the mall was closed. I thought it was a win-win-win in a whole bunch of different directions. So I have a great challenge of and I understand the selling of the lands. I sort of come back to when I hear promises made and promises not kept. I also know promises made relative to the MCC that were also not kept, not just selling a particular piece of property to finance it. It was regarding other financing options, but that's not for here. So I'll be honest, I'm in between Councillor Niznik's full retention and Deputy Mayor Wink's partial retention. But we do definitely need more parking. The concept of putting in a full-scale parking garage, if you ask the city of St. Catharines relative to the cost of what went into their original building of the one downtown there, a multi-level parking garage is just abhorrently expensive, and it was only put in because they had absolutely no other option. And I don't think that's an option really that's can be considered financially feasible for us, unless you're going to go to full paid parking for everything all the time, all over the Meridian Center. And I don't think we're going down that route. So I haven't clarified anything. I just wanted to get my points out that I'm as much up in the air as pretty much everybody on this one. And I don't know whether I'm ready to make a binding decision at this point, to be honest.
Excellent. Thank you for those comments, Councillor Kerr. I'll go back to Councillor Niznik.
Yes, thank you again. Sorry, I need my glasses. So just if looking at the report here, if we listen to the RV Anderson Associate Limited, we need to think of the future as well. So our town is growing, and it states in here that by 2032, which is only 9 years away, the parking deficiency at the MCC will increase to be needing up to 125 to 170 additional parking spaces. So that's in the report there. So that, again, kind of behooves us to make sure that we retain that portion. I think if the bottom part, the southern part of that part 4 is sold, I'm just wondering if the financial gain on that is actually going to make any difference or a big enough dent to make it warranted that we sell that property. Certainly if you develop it, then yes, you get future tax dollars that you would be missing and losing out on. But I think if we look forward a wee bit, we just need to be cautious that our town is growing in leaps and bounds, and we will need that parking in the future. I travel to arenas all over Canada, and it is very frustrating for users in arenas when they get to an arena and they do not have any parking. They're parking on roadways, they're parking on grass areas, they're parking everywhere, and they don't care as long as they can get into that arena. They park wherever they can. So I think we really need to be careful that we don't give away these precious parking spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eckert.
I shouldn't have been a gentleman and allowed Councillor Niznik to go first, but I agree with her comments. Thank you. It's my one and only today. That's it. I'm done. I agree with Councillor Wink and Councillor Niznik's comments. As Councillor Kerr said, there were promises made when the MCC was built. And as Councillor Niznik has stated, the dent in the debt to the MCC that we would realize through the sale of this land is minimal at best. And I realize any amount would go to satisfy a number of people around town. But when you look at the big picture, like Councillor Niznik said, to honor that with a minimal contribution and yet give up those lands that we desperately need parking for. The MCC is busy. It's only going to get busier. There's multiple events that go on there every weekend. I would be in favor, as Councillor Wink said, to keep a number of spaces, develop that area, 74 spaces if that's the number, and look at selling the other property, which would pay for that parking lot or the better part of it. I think that any reasonable person would understand that decision. I would be totally against building a parking garage. I have firsthand knowledge of the parking garages in St. Catharines and the amount of maintenance that is going on those structures, the times that they're down, and the although I'm not comparing that area of St. Catharines to Pelham, the problems that occur in there, especially at night. So I would be supportive of Councillor Wink's idea of developing spaces for parking and selling off some of the other. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Eckert. Councillor Olson.
Mr. Mayor, through you, to be clear, I'm not proposing a parking garage. I'm proposing more creativity and probably including something in the area of scheduling, because if you've got a schedule that creates two big events at the same time, which I've seen happen, then you're going to get overcrowding for that period of time. But we're still talking about the promise that was made to the majority of people don't use the MCC. We live in an aging community, and there's a lot of people that just don't use it. And we made a promise that this would eventually pay for itself with the sale of the land. And now we're going to go back on that. And I think there are creative options, including scheduling and optimizing the properties that we have. And I'm not saying we don't put the parking in, because we definitely need more parking. It doesn't take into account the idea of transit and people who are going to be able to use transit when that improves. But I think anything to do with using that land, just foregoing the profit on the land it has to be considered deeply.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. One last, go ahead, Councillor Eckert.
Yes, one thing that I did forget to add was that perhaps 10.1.4 is going to deal with some of the issues in regards to empty parking lots at night and weekends, etc.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I was going to myself point that out. Oh, yeah, and let's go to Councillor Hildebrand first.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm in agreement with Councillor Eckert and Councillor Wink. I think the hybrid option is where we need to go to some extent. I agree there's not enough parking spots, but I think the dedication of the lot that we've made by putting in temporary parking is the best option that I see going forward. So I know we're caught between selling all of it, selling part of it, and I guess I'm in the hybrid option of selling part and retaining the temporary lot as a permanent lot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kerr?
Listening to all this through you, Mr. Mayor, reminds me of the farmer who decided to stay in business by slowly selling off his property until the point where he had nothing left. And it is a partial concern, I guess, that I have. We do know we have a parking issue in the entire town. It was brought up. It's one of the things I foresee with the MCC parking lot as the development surrounding it. There's a lot of discussion of people complaining about vehicles being parked on streets, which we know causes snow plowing issues, multiple vehicles in single car driveways, but there's someone on the street, et cetera, and these types of things. Having adequate parking is always a plus. As I listen to our other councillors and seeing using the hybrid formula, probably let's just say it's not the best want, but it's probably the best do that I foresee for the group in terms of matching things, recognizing that the challenge will be, and what I'm concerned about is that whatever development, if the property's sold, whatever development goes in there will, say it's commercial or whatever in that, suddenly sprawl into parking into the MCC during normal operating hours. I see it in Fenwick, in that the municipal parking lot in town is used by a couple of businesses with half a dozen vehicles every day, all day long, because they don't have sufficient parking at their business. So that's my only concern relative to the selling off of part of the property or whatever. What may be the alternate sprawl that may occur at the same time.
Thank you. I remember, if I can just recall, when I first became mayor, and I got a very very strong email from someone who was from out of town. He came in at 1 a.m. or something, and he asked the question, how could you possibly build such a beautiful facility and not have any place to park around it? I still remember that email. It came in either around 2018 or 2019, and I never did answer it. He was out of town, whatever. But and I'm sure we all hear that all the time, even now. That and I'm wondering if on a decision this as such as this, because anyone who uses the MCC, whether it be hockey parents with their children or basketball, obviously they're going to be for the parking, don't have enough, blah, blah, blah. And the other way, of course, is the financial gain, financial health of the town by going to a hotel, which is obviously, I think, the financially the most lucrative to do it. I can't, I wonder if it would, it didn't say anything in the report, if we could possibly have a couple of open houses and have advertise it well. We always do seem to have good citizen participation on our open houses. Whenever we, I remember on Hay Street when we were deciding that subdivision and what those people wanted, we had a very good turnout to those. There's a name for them, and I forget what they are. Director of Planning, what are those meetings called?
Yes, we did a design charrette.
There we go. Yes, thank you. So I'm just throwing it out there. I realize that we are here to make the decisions, and I have no problem with that. But to hear maybe from a better wide range of input, I'm wondering if we shouldn't have a couple of charrettes and do it that way. Like I say, it's. In one way, it's straightforward. We obviously need parking. In another way, what's better for the financial health of the town is indeed what could be known as the hybrid situation. And I know I brought this up before, and I hate to repeat it, but there is that wide boulevard on the west side of the arena that we have some real nice row of trees, and God knows if we ever take them out. But at the same time, do we have a facility or we have a park? And of course, it's nice to have both. But if you were to do something to that boulevard and put angled parking there, it would be nice to know whether staff could do this as a staff report. How many spaces would we have? Would we have to move any underground infrastructure? It'd be nice to know what it would cost to make those parking spots, but that's up to council to decide whether we want to go any further with that. But anyway, I'm throwing it out there that perhaps a couple of open houses and hear what the community at large would like to say on that. But again, I'll leave that up to a council decision. Councillor Wink, did you have your hand up before I go ahead, sir?
Mayor, just piggybacking on something that Councillor Kerr mentioned, that if we sell that remnant piece of property, are we going to have impact from that development start using our parking? That land right now is zoned commercial. It allows for apartment buildings up to 10 stories, and then I see that there's also a provision in there that would allow it to go to 12 stories. And that's going to create a heck of a burden on our parking lot if we did that. I think there should be a caveat in there if we sell it that we limit what can go in there, as far as if it's going to be apartment building, that it can only go so high because of the number of parking spaces around, or it can only cover a certain amount of area, so they do have parking, but you don't want the impact of development. We own the property now. We've got control of the property. We don't want impact if we sell it that half of the residents and their guests are going to be using the MCC. And we had that same thought process when the medical building was being done, because there was supposed to be shared parking. And really the shared parking was going to be, we share our parking for them and we get very little use of their parking. So just some comments, food for thought on that if we do the hybrid model, that we've got to look at rezoning that and restricting what can go in there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kurt?
Yeah, this seems to be, I think, to be honest, Mayor, your comment about having open house sessions rather than make a final decision at this point, from my perspective, I think I would glean a lot from those particular events, and I think would provide a lot more information for all of us to maybe hammer down to a point where we've had more input than just relying on our own gut instincts. So I'm really not sure what to do with this particular motion, because there is decisions to be made in there. But if we go to gain more information, I think we come to a better decision for all.
Okay. Councillor Wink, I see your hand up. No? Okay. To the CAO perhaps, before any further council.
That was a really good discussion. And I think it's given us a bunch of food for thought. We don't normally put reports that have so little opinion or so few recommendations. You read the recommendations and there is no recommendation. It's please tell us how to proceed. Because frankly, I don't think there's a bad option in the report. I don't think it's hard to find fault with anything anyone said. There are a lot of demands for this land and a lot of good ways to use it. And so what I would suggest to you, Council, is to, at this point, hone in on one of two ways forward, which is either collectively decide that we should hold some open houses and that we should aim those well into Q1 next year, and or in the alternative, direct us to come back to you with some pointed follow-up reports that only look at one or two options. Really, I think you're sort of, based on what I've heard from you, you kind of have two in mind that sort of make sense. So we can write reports that show different variations of hybrid models, because we do own all the land. There is nothing saying that it has to be 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, 60, 55-45 are things. And or looking at the cost of retention and or what could be done. I'll use it creatively as far as land use goes. And if you prefer the open house model to try to facilitate some direct community feedback, do you want us to maintain all of the options within the reports, or sort of bring them in sort of, I've really heard two things from you so far in your discussion and debate, and sort of focusing on those and permutations of those. I think in either event, the first quarter of, we get most of the budget done in December, and then a little part of it done in January. I'm assuming it goes relatively smoothly after, and that by the end of January we have all the budgets passed. February and March are good times for public meetings about the future use of the building, because amongst other things, we're in the winter season, and that's always when it's hardest to park, because the snow has to go somewhere, and it creeps in on the parking spaces, right? You get to your lowest number about the middle of January or the middle of February, right? That you're going to have all year. So experiencing it when it's most under stress is maybe a good time to have those open houses. Realistically, you've put this item in the strategic plan quite appropriately. It's one of the largest decisions you'll make over this term of council. And I think it would be great if we could come to a decision point in 2024. But no matter what, it's not a 2024 regardless of what the decision is, it doesn't get done in 2024. Hopefully the decision gets made, and then we can do a bunch of the footwork leading to the execution of whatever the decision is. But really, you're talking about something in 2025, I think, as far as execution goes. So with that, regardless of whether your preference is follow-up staff reports, and all of us are about to get consumed with budget, and we already have a lot going on this calendar year, I'm saying that's Q1, or if they're going to be open houses and or engage Pelham, we have an excellent website for that purpose as well. That I really think Q1 next year is the right time for us to really sink our teeth into this. And I hope that, I hope either way that's useful or helpful to you. We'd welcome now perhaps some conversation about what the best mechanism going forward is. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. I suppose we could do staff reports and the public consultation. It sort of seems vaguely rude to do one while you're doing the other, because it implies either one or the other. You're either going to ignore the staff report or going to ignore the public consultation, as the case may be. So I would recommend one or the other during Q1, but as you prefer, happy to take your direction. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. CAO. And building on his comments, what are the comments from council? Council Nesnick?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, I guess. I like your idea of the public meetings. I think that was brilliant. So I would certainly be in support of that, and seeing what our community really does feel should be done with the lands at this point in time, knowing that our town is growing and that there is a future need for it's going to be just an increased use of the MCC. Just wondering if it's possible to get a valuation of the land in a staff report moving forward. That could help with maybe the decision moving forward. I know it's done in camera, or maybe you already have that information, I don't know, but certainly a valuation of the land might help also residents to know that this land is worth, I don't know, let's say $10 million. I'm sure it's not, but $10 million, $20 million. And
Sold.
And, do you want to spend another $1.5 million paving over that $10 million piece of property or not? So I think that would help residents, but I like the idea of your open house, so I'm certainly in favor of that. But I think a valuation of the lands would even help myself with that decision moving forward.
So, Mr. CAO, would that be included in a report coming forward then, going forward?
No, it quite intentionally will not. We
Okay.
have a very good idea of the valuation, and we will, in closed session, be informing you of that. We're not sure if it's going to be in 2 weeks or in 4, but in either event, we're going to have a closed session discussion with you on that point. And we will speak in terms of you can order that that's disclosed publicly. We are going to strongly endorse not doing that. And at the end of the day, the decision is yours. But certainly the staff intention is to speak in generalities. Most people who live in this municipality have an understanding that their land is now if they didn't already know that, the last 5 or 6 years have taught them that land is extremely valuable. And so it's not a small number. But so you will know within the month from today, and whether or not you choose to make that public knowledge, it has significant impact on our sale process, obviously. Nevertheless, I appreciate why there is some public interest in that number, and I'm sure you also appreciate why the law lets us keep that privileged. So in any event, we'll have that discussion with you either 2 weeks today or 4 weeks today, but we are going to have that discussion with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any other questions? Let's go to Council Wink.
So at this point, do we need direction to staff, or do we need a motion being put forward to engage the public through open houses in the first quarter of next year, or do we motion or direction?
May I suggest that motion is absolutely appropriate at this point in time, A, and B, you can choose, of course, how much specificity you wish to put in the motion. But the question is, are we, because it really changes how we approach an open house. Are we approaching it as the whole enchilada, the sky is the limit, anything is possible? Or are, because we've now, at this point in time, over the last, say, 3 years, we've written 4 or 5 reports on this. So certainly the staff perspective was, I think, clearly known, and we've heard what you have to say. So the question is, in your motion, are you going to tell us to bring forward sort of 2 or possibly 3 permutations and as starting points, much like we're doing with the ward boundary review? You have to have something half-baked, so you have something to talk about and work with. Or do you want us to come forward with sort of a blank slate and you tell us? They're 2 very different propositions, and that impacts how we approach it. So we'd certainly appreciate some guidance there on that piece, but beyond that, if the motion says Q1 of 2024, we'd be most appreciative.
So really there's, as far as I'm concerned, there's 3 options. Sell it all, retain it all, or do a hybrid. So those are your options that you would present at an open house. And again, I agree with you, like have the open house in February, March.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Curry.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councillor Wink. I guess every time I get into one of these sell-off, I hear the words 407, 407, 407 in the back of my brain, recognizing I think taking it to the public is the right thing. If we can have the design charrettes as they got, maybe they can have charcuterie with it. Maybe mix the words together. We can work on these options. But I think that is, as Councillor Wayne said, I think we have 3 options presented. These are what are brought to the public. I think that the locations of these meetings don't necessarily have to be at a singular location. I think we should try and have it, not just at the Meridian Center, but at other ones. But that's more the technical side of getting it out there. But just to make sure we reach to the different parts of the community to have them, because the comments are made, there are different people that utilize it, don't utilize it, make it accessible to those so they can at least attend and make comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Olson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that the solution to complicated things like this is probably going to be a combination of things. I'm not opposed to a hybrid, but I want to make sure that we're creative. The global trend in the world is 24-hour cities, and are we really using the MCC to the full extent? And can we keep it open for a couple hours more a night with the implications of cost? And could that make it possible to schedule things that don't happen at the same time? And I don't suppose that that's going to solve the problem, but it can solve part of the problem. And maybe we don't have to have 75 spaces there or whatever it is. But I think that should be considered.
Okay, thank you. And also going on the thread of the other 2 councillors, are you in favor of the going to the public and using those 3 options?
Yes, I think I am. I am your Mr. Mayor, and like in a field of grizzly bears and the donkey, sometimes the donkey knows the way home. So.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any other comments on the proposal of going to a public meeting and with the 3 options? I don't see any other comments. Should we do a vote on that?
If you like, Mr. Mayor, so there is a motion on the floor that talks about council identifying and directing staff with respect to the next steps. If council's reached a consensus on what those next steps are, I will just add them to the motion for a final vote for staff direction. So,
well, I think we can go with Councillor Wink's polishing of the idea of open houses and staff bringing forward the 3 obvious options. Mr. CAO, any comments on that?
I think well, we'll discuss as SLT, but my inclination would be to hold 3 sessions, 2 at the MCC and 1 elsewhere, to utilize Engaging Pelham, which is a phenomenal online tool and can put up a bunch of visuals and graphics and maps and the like, and people can vote, etc. And that what we'll do, what I'd like to commit to, regardless of where we land exactly, is to provide council with an information report with, this is our plan on these days, these evenings, these afternoons, whatever that happens to be. And this is what we think it'll look like. And that way you can countermand us if there's anything you disagree with or dislike. But otherwise, it'll give us a plan and also put out in the public realm when those events will happen. And I think 3, having sort of been through something similar now with the cannabis years back, I think a series of meetings at different times, different days of the week, and different locations, plus the online capacity, will get us a very good overview and allow you to really take the pulse of the community at the end of it, so that you can make a decision that's best for Pelham.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And you have got that all down, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, I've got all that down and more for you. If you'd like it read back, I can do that for you right now.
Please.
So I have a well-thought-out motion moved by Councillor Olson and seconded by Councillor Nisnik that the report be received for information, and that council identifying staff to hold 3 public sessions for stakeholder engagement early in 2024, 2 at the MCC, 1 elsewhere in the municipality, and that prior to those public engagement sessions, staff will provide an information report for council's final approval for the agendas for those sessions.
Is that, okay, everyone agree with that? Okay, I believe you've, as usual, hit the nail on the head, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. So if there's no more discussion, I think, Mr. Mayor, you could proceed with the vote on that.
Okay, any further discussion? Not seeing any, all in favor? Thank you, unanimous. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't know if you want to break at this juncture. We have one more staff report and then not much remaining in the agenda, or if you just want to motor through.
Is everyone comfortable if we just proceed? Then let us proceed.
Okay, so moving to item 10.1.4, be it resolved the council receive report 2023-0219, potential overnight paid parking at the MCC for information, and that council endorse in principle the move to offer overnight pay for service parking at the MCC, and that council endorse an exemption to the town's purchasing bylaws so as to allow sole sourcing for this service to Honk Mobile platform so as to adopt online payment for overnight parking, and that staff return with a subsequent report during the 4th quarter containing specific details as proposed fee levels, permissible times of day, exact locations, as well as associated amendments to the 2024 user fee guide for council's approval. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments on this report? Councilor Eckert.
Just one question or one area of concern, and I would direct this to our fire chief, who is in charge of bylaw. How are we going to enforce this? Bylaw generally doesn't work at night, and that's when we would need to be monitoring what vehicles are in there and if they, bless you, and if they have the right to be in there. So do you have any comment on that, or is it too premature for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe a bit premature, but looking at this software and the way it works, the issue, this is really going to be complaint driven, but the issue is not going to be at night. After 10 o'clock at night, the parking lot's empty, and it doesn't start getting busy until 8, 9 o'clock the next morning. So the residents in that immediate area that, say, buy this service will be parking probably most likely in those hours. There won't need any surveillance or investigation unless it's complaint driven. We can do something, but I think the problem is where it will arise is when the people that hold these permits try to park there on Saturdays during large events and stuff, and that way we can, bylaw can look at it.
Counselor?
Okay, I guess, thank you for that. My concern is that if you get 10 residents in that area and they say, hey, we can park there at night, and they go on the honk app and they purchase that right, and then you've got 10 others that say, well, nobody's really checking on us anyway, so I'm just going to dump it there, and as long as I have it out by 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm parking for free. I guess maybe we rely on the 10 that are paying to say, hey, my neighbor isn't paying. But it's something that I support this. I just worried about how we're going to fairly enforce the use of it and the payment for those spots. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. I will turn to the CAO.
I don't want to get to the end result first. I agree with the chief. There is some slight prematurity to this, but there are 3 or 4 plans for enforcement. We can designate other staff for the purpose of enforcing just one bylaw. You have the power to designate staff as provincial offences officers for, say, one statute specifically. So we do already have staff who are present at the MCC at 10 and 11 o'clock at night, as you know. That's one piece, and if this does occur, we simply are. We already have a third of the year where we have bylaw staff who do work at night. So that's 2/3 of the year where they don't as a default, but if this happens, we simply are going to periodically and randomly have shifts where bylaw is working at night. That's where it's going to go, because we will have to enforce, and frankly, Councillor, you are correct. We cannot rely on merely the goodwill of others to follow the rules. You have to trust but verify, as Ronald Reagan said. So the technology exists. I think one of the things staff are hoping to hear from you, obviously we think there's a very good opportunity here because you have demand from residents for a service. There's technology that exists to allow us to create a new revenue line without an exceptional amount of work on staff part. So there's a want and a need and an opportunity for revenue. So surely there's a way to marry those things together. Would very much, we have had a number of growing pains as we work with each other on the issue of sole sourcing. So if you take issue with the notion that there's a preferred service candidate, now is the time to broach that with us, or not. But I certainly want to flag that for your attention, because if the direction is going to be to do otherwise, now is absolutely the right time to tell us that, or accept the staff preference, which is in the report and quite clearly stated based on reasons. As we were happy to comply, but if you wish us to engage in the traditional RFP process, now is absolutely the time to tell us that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Mr. CAO. Let's go to Councilor Wink.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO, you've outlined very well the benefits of honk and where it's being used. Must be a lot of geese out there or whatever, but I don't know. I don't have a problem with going sole sourcing on this particular one. It's tried, tested, and true. One of my questions to you is how many residents have reached out to the town staff saying, you know, we want more parking at night, and we're just piggybacking on a conversation that we had recently on how limited our parking is at the MCC at certain times. I'll do a 3-part question for you. The other thing I'm concerned about is in the wintertime, we could have 10 cars parked there and the plows come through and they get stuck in there, and now we've eliminated 10 parking spots at the MCC because these cars were there and we couldn't plow the parking spots.
To the CAO, please.
Ms. Van Ravensway is elsewhere on corporate business today, and she, of course, has the best answer for, she has the most interactions with residents with adjoining property, and they make the demands to her. But I can tell you that I have personally had, I want to say 5 interactions with residents who've, or, emails or phone calls, what have you, fundamentally making the request to, can I pay you for parking? So that's, a number of them have got to, and about a handful have got to me directly. So I know her number's higher. I don't know what her number is now. There will be operational challenges with respect to winter maintenance. The great news is I am not directly in charge of Public Works, and that will get to, but ultimately at the end of the day, there's a solution. And I think part of it depends on how much we expand a parking lot or not and make a permanent additional parking on the side, except, the other report that's both related and not related that you just discussed. So there is some moving piece to that, but I'll hand that over to the director. And then I feel like there was a third part and I've just dropped it, but well, honk honk then.
Any other comments, Councillor Wink?
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Olson.
Mr. Mayor, to my knowledge, occasionally I'll take the opposite view, Mr. Mayor, so this is one of those times. And I'm wondering about whether this is not the first time that we have parking paid parking in a public site in the whole town of Pelham. And is this a route we want to go down? Because we don't do it now, and we're going to set a precedence. And facetiously, I'm wondering if this could be the source of funding for the new parking garage at the MCC.
No. Thank you, Councillor Olson. Any comments on that precedent setting, Mr. CAO?
The report isn't more than it is. We've had requests from members. There are residents in the town of Pelham who want to pay us to park at the MCC. We are literally responding to a community demand, I hope providing ultimately good public service, and there's an opportunity for value here. I don't think you should fetter yourself. 3 years from now, you might want to, at some point in time, this community will get to the point where it wants to charge for parking. I don't have a personal agenda. You haven't approved that as part of a strategic plan. This isn't a Trojan horse. But you know what? Niagara-on-the-Lake functions really well. It's a gargantuan part of their annual budget. We're not Niagara-on-the-Lake, but you live in a world where lots of municipalities charge for parking. As we grow in size, I anticipate there will be a day, but this isn't that day, and this isn't an attempt to do that. This is in response to specific direct demands for service from residents and an opportunity because at night that parking lot is empty or all but empty, and in the all but empty, yeah, there's a lot of construction going on in the area, et cetera, but I think we all know or fundamentally understand that that's mostly people who are now live adjacent, and they actually want to pay us for the privilege of using the space. So this feels like there's a win for all involved. And as for future parking and issues, one day this is not that day, and ultimately you and your successors will control that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Kerr?
And I'm sure that the CAO with his background will ensure that the legal liabilities and everything are not accrued by any of the town for anything that may happen to such vehicles being parked in those particular locations overnight, those types of things. I mean, I say it somewhat facetiously, but there's always been, the minute you pay to rent something, whose obligation is to protect and make sure that things don't happen. The snow removal you highlighted very quickly, that was the one that came to my mind was, well, if we're losing spots because we have to pile snow in area and then we put extra vehicles in those spots, and if they're not removed in a time, if the vehicles don't move in a timely fashion, and there's a Saturday hockey tournaments and everything else where all the parking's already at a premium, and these are, so it's a variety of things. I don't have a difficulty in charging. It's evolutionary. It's things that happen in every community. Grimsby has it. Lincoln has it. When you go to certain spots, you pay. So I'm not averse to it, but I think that it's something to investigate, and it's not that many. And the challenge will be where it can be and how you can best implement it. So I'm fine.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Any other questions or comments on the report? Not seeing any. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. So with that discussion, we are ready to head to the vote on that motion.
Okay, so we'll just call a vote on this item. All those in favor? All those, no, okay, it's all, oh, I'm sorry.
So,
You got
I'm
count.
confused. We're taking this for information. That council identify and direct staff. Have we given that clear direction as far as we're gonna single source honk and the like? So I think there's a little bit more than just we've oh, you're on the wrong one. Sorry, wrong one. It's in there. All right.
Maybe
There you go. Principal, ours is with single source. I apologize. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Thank you, Councilor Wink. So we've had the vote, right? So all, and it was unanimous. Mr. Clerk, are we set to go?
I think so, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
So, maybe I missed something. So, we don't have anything under new business, nothing under unfinished business. We do have presentation and consideration of bylaws. So, I have a motion moved by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Eckhart. Be it resolved that Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaw, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass the same, and the mayor and clerk be here and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaw. Bylaw 57-2023 being a bylaw to dedicate lands as a public highway.
Excellent. Any questions, discussion on this item? Not seeing any. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Item carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So now moving to item 14.1, we do have a notice of motion moved by Councillor Olson and seconded by Councillor Eckhart. Whereas Council of the Town of Pelham is dedicated to implementing infrastructure enhancements, and whereas Centennial Park experiences high usage.
Maybe he wants to read it.
Oh,
I don't know.
yes.
Councilor Olson, do you want to read it? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my apologies.
Yep.
Now therefore be it resolved that council directs staff to prepare a report addressing potential infrastructure enhancements, including but not limited to the installation of pedestrian sidewalks, speed bumps, bollards, barriers, parking lot resurfacing, and the exploration of an alternative egress point, and that council directs staff to report back to Q4 of 2023, and that staff be directed to include funding for the implementation of infrastructure improvements at Centennial Park in the 2024 budget for council's consideration. And again, my apologies, Councillor Olson. I love the microphone. Hate to give it up.
Councilor Olson, any comments you
Yes,
wish to
thank you,
make on your
Mr.
motion?
Mayor. The clerk did an excellent job. So, the nature of this motion, I thank Councilor Eckert for seconding it for me, is the fact that the park has become so busy and so well used, and so well used by small children, and these small children are sometimes very close to very large vehicles, and on some of the streets or some of the roadways are very narrow, and we get people parking along them, and I believe that there's improvements that need to be made before we have a real disaster. The kids get all excited when they're in the splash pad and you see them running around, and it's only going to get busier as we add to the park. And this is an attempt to do something in the area of safety to make sure that we don't have a disaster. The alternate egress point, that would be the next to the fire hall, and of course the chief would have something to say about that, I'm sure. it's a possibility for big events like the carnival and those kinds of things, because you try and get two vehicles going both ways down the street and coming up to the intersection. I'm not proposing that that would be something that would be open for at all times, but that just for occasions and one way, one direction only. So that was the purpose of the motion, and that we would get an idea of what could be done. I have in mind something like what you see in St. Catharines with the 50-mile-an-hour bollards on the street on Pelham there, and that does slow people down, and I think that's what we need. And we had a presentation from the pickleball people who were complaining about the sand on the court, on their courts and that type of thing. I'm not proposing that we do any of that, but we would learn from this study. We would learn the study and report. We would learn what the cost of this and the cost implications are. And I'm not proposing that this happen in the 2024 budget, but put it on the budget and perhaps red circled or whatever we do. When the grant comes along, we're ready for this. But I think it's a necessary thing for the safety of our children and the prevention of a disaster.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Olson. And Councilor Eckert, as a seconder, do you have any comments?
No, I believe Councillor Olson eloquently put our position forward. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. I will now open it up to council, and Councilor Kerr.
I just have one question. It's to support Councillor Olson's intention is good. I guess the question is whether the time frame is pertinent, and considering we're already into Q4, for staff to undertake. To me, this is a fairly large, when I look at the list of potential infrastructure, including but not limited to, there's an awful lot of things that are in there. There's a lot of moving parts, and I'm just not sure by forcing it into a Q4 report that it gives staff the time to fully investigate what needs to be looked at. And my instinct is that the report would be in Q1 of 2024 rather than this quarter. I just think staff needs the time. Personally, if I was to undertake this, there's an awful lot of moving parts.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerr. I will turn to the CAO for his comments on the reasonable time frame.
Watch me duck and dodge. Actually, I'd like to defer the matter to Mr. Marr's judgment. He'll be responsible for the report, and I'm sure whatever time frame he's prepared to commit to, he will honor. So, over to you, sir.
To the director.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. So if we're going to include these as part of 2024 budget deliberations, then we need to have the report in front of council prior to that budget deliberation. So that'll be what we'll strive to do. A lot of the stuff here we are working on. Some of these items were included as part of the budget presentation, the open house that was had. So some of these items we're currently working on estimates for the work to get done. I will report that staff did identify an issue and concern with respect to entrance to the park from Church Street. So we've taken the opportunity under the Church Street reconstruction contract. We will be installing a concrete sidewalk into the park from Church Street. So that's going to be done as part of the reconstruction and restoration works as part of that contract. But the other items here, I think we can come with a report prior to budget deliberations and get something in front of council with some estimates on these projects.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Kerr?
Just as a follow-up, I guess my concern is regarding an alternative egress, which potentially would be by the fire hall, which is moving through particular lands and other things that may create more need for follow-up, considering that there's a ditch that runs through there, there's active water movement, there's a whole bunch of other things, and it would also create traffic flow relative to a fire hall entry and exit. So it was just the one that seemed to me to be the most complicating of virtually everything that was here.
Hopefully your concerns will be addressed in a staff report. Sure. Thank you. Any other concerns on the motion? Not seeing any. I will now call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So earlier in the meeting, we did have Councillor Olson, who indicated a notice of motion, which will come before you at the next meeting on the Fontale Platform Tennis Sewer and Water Hookup. And Councillor Eckhart spoke to me at the start of the meeting as well, that he would like to bring forward a notice of motion at this point.
Councillor Eckhart?
Thank you. This is a notice that I'll be bringing a motion forward at the next meeting. It's from the Pelham Active Transportation Committee. Our Director of Public Works, Mr. Marr, is aware of this, their position, and it deals with the removal or potential removal of the rumble strips on Canberra Road between Effingham and the top of the hill, I guess Oak Ridge. It's all around safety of cyclists using that area. So I'll be bringing that motion forward at the next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we have nothing scheduled for closed session, so there's no motion to go into camera. We have now item 17, which is the confirmatory bylaw, and I have a motion moved by Councillor Wink and seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, third time and passed, being bylaw number 58-2023 to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council for the town of Pelham at its regular meeting held this 4th day of October 2023.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? Not seeing any, Mr. Clerk. All those in favor? Thank you.
Now moving to item...
Passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry. Moving to item number 18, I have a motion moved by Councillor Niznik and seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for October 18th, 2023 at 9 a.m.
Thank you. All those in favor? And none opposed? Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And this meeting is concluded. Thank you, council and staff.
You started to ask about Hawk. I see this. Very well.